All right, let's just jump right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking something absolutely wild, the bizarre 11-year survival of a hypothetical data theft syndicate. We are going to look at this totally fascinating intersection where severe psychiatric conditions, specifically the link between trauma and psychosis, slam right into concrete constitutional law in the realm of syndicated Estafa. It honestly sounds like the setup for a crime thriller, but we're looking at documents and clinical hypotheses that map out the exact gambler mechanics of a psychotic brain and how that creates a real, incredibly complex ecosystem that exploits private data.
So here is our roadmap for today. 1. Anatomy of syndicated Estafa. 2. Trauma, grief, and psychosis. 3. The gambler's psychotic brain. 4. Cults and shared psychosis. 5. The constitutional legal reality. And finally, 6. Taking civil action. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Anatomy of Syndicated Estafa, the 11-year underground industry.
Okay, the very first thing we need to wrap our heads around is how an underground industry like this even survives when the people running it are, well, highly volatile. We're talking about operators exhibiting severe cluster B personality traits. Basically, that means highly erratic, narcissistic, or even antisocial behaviors. They operate entirely in the shadows, using aliases and dummy corporations to exploit stolen personal data. Now, typically, criminal rings run by highly unstable people crash and burn super fast. But this operation has allegedly survived for over a decade. The big question is, how?
Well, take a look at this quote straight from our source files. It totally nails the approach we are taking today. We aren't here to play judge, jury, and executioner. Actually, scratch that. We are purely here to impartially analyze clinical hypotheses to decode the actual mechanics of how a machine like this functions. We aren't diagnosing anyone. We are just looking under the hood of the operation.
Moving on to Section 2, Trauma, Grief, and Psychosis, the microscopic neurobiology.
This right here is the absolute key to our 11-year mystery. You see, if a syndicate leader was in a state of continuous psychosis, the whole operation would collapse in a matter of days. But episodic psychosis, that's completely different. Think of it like a neurological toggle switch. During a lucid phase, the leader is highly functional, easily orchestrating complex, calculated frauds. But then, when severe stress or trauma hits, bam, the switch flips. They experience a very distinct psychotic break from reality, and bizarrely enough, they use this chaotic energy to re-energize their followers with some brand new delusional vision.
You really have to see this stark contrast between these two mental states. For a healthy brain, grief means processing a loss. It hurts, you feel vulnerable, but you accept reality. But for a fragile, narcissistic ego that completely relies on external validation, severe trauma or a massive failure completely shatters their reality. To them, vulnerability literally feels like a psychic death, so their brain panics and decompensates. It forcefully manufactures a grandiose or paranoid delusion just to emotionally survive the day. They abandon reality because the real world has just become too psychologically painful to exist in.
Which brings us to Section 3, the gambler's psychotic brain, the neurobiological feedback loop.
Now this is where it gets incredibly fascinating. The clinical term here is aberrant salience, but you can think of it as the core gambler mechanic of the psychotic brain. Imagine this. The operators pull off a high-risk data theft, right? That triggers a massive, jackpot-level dopamine dump in the brain. Because they're constantly living with severe underlying grief and high cortisol, this chemical rush feels like an absolute lifeline. The brain totally misinterprets this high, treating a successful crime like a winning spin at a slot machine. It assigns cosmic meaning to it, using that chemical rush to validate its own alternate reality.
Let's break down how completely backward this logic is. It happens in 3 steps. Step 1 is the dopamine flash, just a massive chemical wave screaming, "This is super important." Step 2 is the epiphany. Instead of using logic, the brain feels the emotional rush first and instantly invents a crazy narrative to justify it. And step 3 is retrocoding. The brain literally reaches back into its memories, maybe a green traffic light or a random song playing on the radio, and twists them to make this delusion feel totally flawless. The emotion comes first, and the brain scrambles to invent the evidence later.
So you kind of have to ask yourself a profound question here. When you're looking at an operation spanning over a decade, and someone's brain is relying on this daily intermittent dopamine rush from a fraud syndicate just to survive their own grief, does their physical body eventually become biologically addicted to the crime?
The answer is actually found in this crazy cellular divide.
The neural network, the brain cells, yeah, they are totally hijacked by the dopamine reward loop. The brain literally prunes away logic pathways to keep the delusion alive. But the rest of the physical body, the heart, the liver, no way. They aren't addicted to the delusion at all. They are just being absolutely battered by it. They're suffering from chronic cortisol exposure, systemic inflammation, and rapid aging.
All right, Section 4. Cults and shared psychosis, the group dynamic.
This dynamic perfectly explains why this syndicate isn't acting like a standard mafia. It operates way more like a cult. It's a clinical phenomenon called folie à plusieurs, which literally translates to the madness of many, a shared psychosis. Because the leader is surrounded by a highly curated, insular group of susceptible people, nobody questions the crazy behavior. Instead, the followers absorb the leader's delusions. They start treating acts of syndicated Estafa not as crimes, but as this exclusive, spiritually validated secret enterprise. And that traps them in this brutal 11-year cycle. First, you have the lucid phase, where they're smoothly running the fraud. Then a stressor hits, triggering the psychotic phase. Aberrant salient spikes and the delusions activate. Step 3 is the folly, where the followers adopt the madness, completely locking in a deep trauma bond. And finally, the crash. The erratic behavior destroys the operation, plunging everyone back into grief, which just resets the entire terrifying loop. It's an inescapable trap of intermittent rewards and devastating crashes. Section 5. The constitutional legal reality shattering the illusion.
Time for a reality check. This foundational constitutional truth completely overrides any of that underground psychological manipulation. Article 3 of the Philippine Constitution makes it crystal clear. Whatever trauma bonds or shared psychosis this syndicate has going on, all of it is absolutely subordinate to the fundamental rights of privacy and human dignity. You simply cannot contract away someone's constitutional rights, let alone do it inside a hidden criminal ring.
So regardless of all those mind games, we actually have a really robust legal arsenal to deal with this. We've got the Data Privacy Act to penalize the unauthorized exploitation of your personal data. If they're using intimate materials for leverage, bam, the anti-voyeurism law kicks in. If the psychological manipulation turns into dead bondage, you're looking at anti-trafficking statutes. And don't forget the Consumer Act, which allows victims to demand immediate refunds for deceptive practices. This behavior is deeply, explicitly illegal across the board.
Finally, Section 6. Taking civil action, dismantling the operation.
Let's talk about how to actually use this information. How do you, a civilian, fight back? Well, even without being a specific victim, any citizen can act. You can file a self-initiated whistleblower report with the Privacy Commission. You can request an advisory opinion that proves their whole business model is illegal. And once you have that, you can force web hosts and payment gateways to deplatform them. You literally choke out their infrastructure. And on top of that, you can demand refunds through mediation. You are systematically dismantling them by just weaponizing the rules they think they're above.
I'm going to leave you with this one thought to chew on. If an entire syndicate only survives because a leader's psychosis infects their followers, and those followers manipulate the rest of us, doesn't the whole house of cards collapse the second we just recognize the manipulation for what it is? Educating ourselves on these hidden mechanics is the very first and most crucial step in taking back our legal and mental autonomy. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and remember, keep questioning the systems around you.